Good morning. I want to start by thanking both Soraya Noor and Professor Etienne Balibar for their hospitality. Professor Balibar for offering his text for multiple readings and interpolations, and Soraya for giving me the chance for intervening from afar. I also apologize for the format of my intervention, which resembles more of a monologue than a dialogue, given the circumstances that as you are together in Lisbon, I have to be in Austria for another event, which was scheduled before this one. But from seeing the program, I am sure that there will be plenty dialogical exchanges going on there, and if eventually a publication stemming from the workshop follows, I will perhaps then be able to contribute further to this horizontal logic of shared reflection. But for now, I will restrict myself to a few very cursory notes and a couple of questions, driven more out of curiosity than to present objections. So, my first note is of appreciation of the richness and density of Etienne Balibar's reflection, which, in the relation between its three moments, from political philosophy through anthropology into ontology, presents a reflection which is quasi-dialectical in nature. Well, it is quasi-dialectical in my view, not only due to its tripartite form, and this choice of form is probably contingent, but also because the order of its presentation could have been reversed. And in a more traditional ontology, this almost certainly would have been so, with metaphysics determining anthropology and then politics. And I would dare to say that the mediations that guide from one standpoint to another are provisional and open-ended, in that they are historical and descriptive. And so we could also read Balibar's piece as another variation of a historical transcendental. But this is only a brief and superficial comment on form, and I want to use the few minutes that I have concentrated on content. So, not having the time to analyze each of the three moments that form the whole of the exposition, my main focus is the following: that of the conditions of possibility of what is alluded to as, and I quote Balibar, a struggle or a resistance against discriminations based on differences, in a way that is bound to challenge not only the identification of the other, but also the identification of oneself. So this is on page 9. End quote. In which, moreover, does not fall back into what Balibar calls another instantiation of the same or sameness. End quote. So, amid the relational ontology that Balibar puts forward, I would be particularly interested in understanding, in the interplay between subjectivity and intersubjectivity, the type of relation or relations to oneself and to others that this possibility requires. In short, then, my preoccupation is twofold. First, how to understand the dialectical relation between identity and differences in the claims of agents themselves, for instance when trying to resist discrimination, and how to spell out those claims in a way that is not itself reifying. Second, on what structures and grounded on what types of relation must this resistance operate in order for social transformation to take place? So allow me to briefly unpack this. One of Balibar's starting points is the paradox of democratic societies formally granting equally liberty to all, while at the same time grounding exclusions on differences and, as it were, allowing for political discriminations to flourish. All this based on an anephebology of what is supposed to be natural. Balibar asserts that anthropological differences, in the strong sense, only arise retrospectively, negatively because they have been challenged, their alleged universal validity undermined. But what, I ask, makes this contestation itself possible? And what makes the difference between those contestations that do succeed in destabilizing the former universalization that came to pass as being natural from those contestations that do not succeed? And what makes certain agents resist discrimination, for instance minorities organizing themselves in the social movement who struggles, while others falter and remain voiceless? So this problem could be stated in the terms of a critical theory of recognition, in the dialectic between the desire for recognition, in this case the recognition of the legitimacy of difference, and the conditions that must be met in order for that desire to succeed, even if only partially. Perhaps this cannot be done through an immanent critique alone. That is, maybe the act of delegitimizing the formally established system of power relations and naturalized anthropological differences can only be done through a partially utopian vantage point. That is, a viewpoint coming from outside the social order currently established, and as such, denaturalizing it. But again, some agents resist, others do not. Some internalize the denigrating difference, others operate a semantic change on it and seek to reevaluate that difference in light of a different set of evaluative criteria. Now, some authors, such as Axel Honneth in The Struggle for Recognition, would make this possibility of resistance depend on the shared experiences and the shared semantics of a social group, such as what was experienced firstly as being merely individual becomes the motor of collective resistance for a whole group. Others, such as Judith Butler in her book Giving an Account of Oneself, would make this possibility depend on the transformation of the normative orders and the language available to us at any given point in time, so that for the desire for recognition to be met, and its struggle to be at least partially successful, a transformation of the symbolic order of society would have to take place. But what makes resistance and transformation possible? This is something I would like to see further developed in Etienne Balibar's standpoint. So, the other aspect closely tied to the first one pertains to the ontology of relation and to the way in which agents interpret themselves in this process. Balibar suggests that we should negate identity in order to avoid, and here I'm quoting, the implicit transformation of difference into another instantiation of the same or sameness. End quote. So from this I take a very interesting suggestion of bypassing an essentialist interpretation of ourselves and others. But still the difficulty remains. We tend to think of ourselves in terms of our personal and collective identities even when, or perhaps even more so when, difference is seen as an integral and defining part of those identities. Destabilizing those identities and differences, understanding that they are no more than a script in a narrative sense, and as Anthony Appiah would argue, not keeping our lives too tightly scripted so as not to reify them, is perhaps a fundamental task for philosophy to take up. But we could ask, is this even possible in practical terms? Perhaps almost everything in the social world, and even in the way we structure meaning, is relational and fluid. But still, people identify with concrete determinations, and struggles are based on those determinations. Emancipation from this structure, recognition of that particular trait. So, how to find the right degree of determination and indeterminacy, while also not forgetting the essential relatedness, embeddedness of our social beings, and the ethical political implications this brings, is an open question for me. Perhaps Professor Etienne Balibar will have a better clue on how to pursue this complicated yet very important inquiry. I have the feeling I did not bring much clarity into the debate, but hopefully your common discussion will help in clarifying these issues further. I thank you for your attention and wish you all an excellent reflection together. Bye.